let's go band. Oh, voice crack. That's funny. Can we laugh? All right, cool.
Chasing after me, you're so good. I can see your light chasing after me. You are good to me. I hear your voice calling out for me. You are good to me.
Well, what's going on, Merge? How you guys doing tonight? Oh, wow, you guys sound real excited right now. Make sure my mic's working. I lost my little headpiece to this thing, so sorry if there's a little bit of feedback. I've got it up here. I just can't get it back on. Oh, my. Well, hey, it's good to have you guys here tonight. I hope that you are excited to be here. Thanks to those that are watching online. We're going to be continuing our series that we're in that we've been calling Soul. But before we do that, I want to just take a minute and kind of reiterate a little bit about what Chuck talked about earlier with what's coming up this next week. All right, our goal, our plan is to kind of move forward and think about summer 2021, kind of getting us off the ground and getting us out of here from Akron and going around the world. That's our goal. And so we want to take teams to inner city Philadelphia. We want to take a team to Mazatlán, Mexico. And we also want to take a team to Haiti. And so all three of those trips are open and available to you as a high school student. And so encourage you to be kind of thinking about, pray about where maybe this summer God is calling you to go. The reason why this next week is a big week is because it's the first round of our team meetings. All right, and so if you are at all interested, I encourage you to come to one of those team meetings this next week. And what I mean by that is, like, you're not like signing your name away, you're not like committing to this, but if you want to know what the trip is going to be about, what the logistics are, the dates, the price, things like that, come this next week to kind of check out what those trips are going to look like. So if you are interested in Mazatlán, Mexico, this coming Sunday, 11 a.m., over in our student center, be there, all right? Encourage, if you want your parents to come along to hear the information, that's a great chance to do that. I will be there, John will be there, and we will walk through kind of what this trip is going to look like for you, okay? If you are interested in Haiti, next Wednesday before Merge, we'll have a meeting down the hallway here in the discipleship wing. We would love for you to be there if you are interested in going to Haiti this summer. And then Philly will be the following Sunday, the 31st, 11 o'clock service over in the Student Center. And you are welcome to go if you are interested in the Philly trip as well. All right, so I know it's hard to think about summer. I know it's especially hard this time of year with everything else going on. But I encourage you, man, spend the next couple of days praying about it, and if you're at all interested, be sure to be there this next week, all right? He talked about baptisms. Listen, if you want to take that next step in your faith, please let somebody know. We would love to get those organized and start happening here at Merge on a Wednesday night, and it's a great way for us to not only provide you an opportunity to kind of take the next step in your faith, but we want to celebrate you. We want to celebrate the life change that's taking place in your personal walk with the Lord, all right? All right, good stuff. So we have been in this series called Soul, and it's the unique aspect, it's the attribute that we have been given by God all the way back in the beginning when we were created. It's what sets us apart from everything else on this planet. You and I have a soul, and it's what lives on, it's what continues on, even when our time here on earth comes to an end. And so our soul is so important, okay? And so 2 weeks ago, what we did is when we introduced this idea, we talked about the importance of a healthy soul needing rest, needing a Sabbath. See, God created everything in kind of like a 7-day period, and after 6 days, when he was complete, he took a day of rest. It wasn't because he was tired, it was because he was finished. And so what he did is presented you and I an example to begin to follow in our lives. You and I need rest. And so 2 weeks ago, what I did is I encouraged you to kind of go out and experience God's creation. Go outside, experience like what he's created. Go for a hike. I know it might be 20 degrees outside, but wear a pair of gloves. It's great to be outside to experience all that God has created. And it gives us this opportunity to kind of connect back to who God is. Last week, we took our conversation a step further, and we talked about this important aspect where we're to own our soul. We're to own the health of our soul. In fact, what we've been doing is looking at an example. His name's David. And what we have found, just so 2 weeks ago, right, here's what we learned from David. My soul finds rest in God alone. And so David wrote this in the book of Psalm, chapter 62. And he talks about that his rest is found in God and God alone. Last week, as we looked at ownership, David gave us this idea that a healthy soul requires work. And what I encourage you to do is to kind of like take time to focus on Psalm 119. Take time and kind of meditate on it, study it, hide God's word in your heart, because when you do so, what you're doing is you're strengthening yourself, right? You're giving yourself the knowledge and understanding of who God is. And in those moments, it allows us to kind of own our soul and make it healthy. And so what I want us to do tonight as we kind of continue this conversation a little bit is to actually go back into the beginning and look at the creation one more time. Because when God created everything, right, he also created man. He created Adam. And you have to understand that when he created Adam, life was perfect. Like literally perfect. There was no illness, right? There was no death. There was no like wild animals. There were no like fire ants or mosquitoes that bite us. Like life was good and it was perfect. When God originally created everything and created Adam, nothing could have been better at that moment. But what's fascinating, this is what I want us to check out. Look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 18 with me, all right? Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. Here's what it says. Then the Lord God said, and this is interesting, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him." So you've got to imagine when God created everything and he created Adam, everything was perfect. Literally, God was with Adam in the garden. But then he says, right after he created everything, that something's not good. That Adam should not be alone. And we think that it's crazy that Adam, like, had it so good. He had it so good while he was in the garden. But yet God still recognized something, that he wasn't as well as he could be. Something was missing. And so what he did is he created a suitable helper. We know that he created Eve, right? Now, as we look at this, we kind of get a great example of kind of the value of community, the value of like companionship that's painted here in the book of Genesis. As he starts here in the beginning, what we do is we're getting this great example of the importance of community with one another. So like, he created everything. He created the plants, animals, fish, stars, all of the above, and everything was like in harmony. But God still recognized that Adam needed somebody. He needed Eve. And so he did that. He created her. Now, we could sit here and we could also look at this example and talk about like, you know, how like a good relationship looks like a husband and a wife. Don't worry, don't hide in your seat. You don't have to go to the bathroom. We're not talking about that tonight. But we are looking at this aspect, this importance of community, this importance of friendship and a relationship, that we can base this kind of in our lives off the example that's been set for us all the way back in the beginning. God said, check this out, all right, God said humankind needed community, and he saw that with Adam. And our souls need to be in relationship with each other, because healthy relationships help keep our souls healthy. I actually encourage you to write that down, because I think we need to understand the importance that the relationships that you and I have with each other help keep our souls healthy. And so this is kind of where we're going to land today, and we're going to press into this importance of you and I having healthy relationships. Talking about this idea of unity. Our souls require unity. And so going off of kind of the theme that we've been doing the past couple of weeks, I want us to continue to look at David here, all right? Because the example that King David kind of gives us in his life, there's actually two great examples I think that we can pull from. And here's the first example, is David's best friend. All right, some of you may know the story, some of you may not, but David actually had an incredible friend. His name was Jonathan. Their friendship was incredibly unique. And here's why, because Jonathan was actually the prince of Israel. What that means is that he was the son of King Saul. Now, we explored a little bit of the story of David several months ago, and we pressed into this kind of tension between King Saul and David. And we're going to hit that a little bit tonight to kind of give us this picture. But we're looking at this friendship that David had with Jonathan. But Jonathan is the son of King Saul. So really, he is the prince of Israel. Now, as we think about King Saul, we have to remember that Saul was one of those guys that was constantly worried about what people thought of him. He actually worried about it so much that it would get in the way of him actually listening to God and leading well. And so it had a great deal of impact on him, and it even affected the country of Israel. Now, as we fast forward and we know the story of when David took on the giant Goliath, what happened after that moment was, Saul made David the commander of the army. God worked in David's life and began to bless David in many ways, and he actually became an extremely successful warrior. And so David was really starting to find some success here and really starting to make a name for himself. Well, one day after he was there was a celebration after a battle, victory that took place. And here Saul is present, David is there, and after the celebration, Saul overheard a group of women kind of giving all this praise and encouragement to David. And David basically had this following where he went. There was a fan club for David. Well, you could imagine how this made King Saul feel, right? You have to remember how insecure King Saul was because he was so focused and worried about how other people viewed him and thought about him. And so here he is the king. He wants the attention being given to him, but rather David, right? This small boy who is now the commander of the army and finding success, he's getting the attention of other people. So you can imagine how jealous King Saul has become of David. Well, guys, what happened is over time, that jealousy got out of hand, right? Over time, what happened was Saul began to despise David. He was so concerned about how people viewed David, he wanted the attention on him. That jealousy got the best of him, and so what happened is he began to attack David. King Saul went after David. He wanted David dead. He made attempts to kill David. The one who ended up defeating Goliath, the one who became the commander of the army, Saul turned on him and now went after him. And so David started to realize that the only option that he had after multiple attempts of his life being taken by King Saul was to run. For him, in order to live and continue living, he needed to get out of there. And so he turned to his friend Jonathan. He asked his friend Jonathan to help him pretty much with his escape. You can imagine the awkwardness of the situation, right? Because remember, Jonathan is Saul's son. And so here David is running for his life. He turns to his friend Jonathan. And when Jonathan realizes that his own dad is going after his best friend, his heart was crushed. He was devastated to find out that his best friend was being attacked by his own dad. And so check out these words that Jonathan spoke to David after realizing what was going down. Here's what it says. In 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 42, Jonathan says, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord is a witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever." Basically, Jonathan is, saying the right things here. He's being an incredible friend to David. But he didn't just stop by saying the right thing. He actually took action. And he helped his friend escape from his own dad. Now, here's a question for you to think about. Are you the kind of friend who only talks? Are you the kind of friend who only talks, or do you help your friends out when there's a time in need? I just want you to evaluate that for a second. Are you a friend who only talks, who's willing to just I'll give encouragement when it's needed. I'll tell you you look nice when you need it. Or are you one who's actually willing to step up and step out and provide and fulfill the needs of your friend in those moments. I think obviously it's important to say the right things. And Jonathan was doing that for David, but Jonathan didn't stop with just his words. He chose to act. He chose to look out for his friends. And I'm telling you right now, real friends look out for one another. Now, in the back of your mind, I need you to begin piecing this together. We're talking about our souls. We're talking about kind of like the core of who we are. And we're talking about this idea of unity. And as we piece this together, we have to understand the unity with one another is important. And real friends, the friendships that you have in your life, they're important. And so a real friend is going to look out for one another. Jonathan and David, they were united in their friendship. Their friendship didn't stop when David chose to leave because he was running from his friend's dad. It continued on. And it went against the king. Not only did Jonathan go against his dad, but he went against the king of Israel. This is big time. If Saul would have found out that Jonathan helped David escape, Saul would have been like, I don't care if you're my son, you're gone as well. To think that Saul would have even killed his own son because of what he was doing. This friendship was unique and it was strong. But it shows you how much Jonathan valued his friendship with David. Now think about your friends right now. Think about your best friend. If you knew someone was going to try to kill your friend, would you do something about it? I bet each or all of us in this room would agree. It's yeah, I'm going to do something, right? I don't know what that's going to look like. And thankfully, most of us will probably never be in that situation, hopefully. But I can imagine we would step up and attempt to do something to protect our friends if they knew their life was on the line. But what about the everyday stuff? What about just the day in and day out? Are you willing to help your friends the way that Jonathan did for David? Are you willing to listen to your friends when they're having a bad day? Will you help them out when it's not convenient to you? Guys, these questions, the answers to these questions, this is where the real unity starts to come into formation in our souls and in our lives. When we understand the importance of looking out for each other and being with each other. And so as we look at David, he had the example of his friendship with Jonathan. But there's another example that we gain from King David as well. And that was his friend Nathan. Nathan was a prophet of the Lord. What a prophet means is that they had a direct line to God. They would speak with God, and it would be their responsibility to kind of share the message to God's people. And so just giving you an idea of who Nathan is, he's a prophet. He has this direct line to God, all right? Now we'll get to Nathan here. Here's a little bit of backstory. Several years after Jonathan helped David run from Saul, David returns and he actually becomes king. What happened was that both Saul and Jonathan were killed tragically at a battle. And so David is up and he's basically been given the throne. He is now king over Israel. And so as the king, you would think that, all right, David, he's kind of worked himself really well into this position. He's got everything in line. Man, he's going to be a great king. Well, then he started to make a series of decisions that we would look at David and be like, bro, what are you thinking? As king, one day he steps out. We've talked about this story in here before. He steps out of his palace and he looks out and he sees a woman bathing over at her house, right? You're like, why are they bathing outside on their rooftops to begin with? Well, the reality is it's probably very hot, and they would bathe in the evening when the sun would go down, and it would basically cool them off. And so here David locks eyes onto something that he enjoys watching, this beautiful woman, right? And he's lusting after her in his heart. Well, he's king. And so the king basically thinks to himself, what I want, I get. And so he sent his servants out to go retrieve Bathsheba. Bathsheba comes over, and you can imagine where that went, all right? Now you think about this, like hindsight is 20/20. Even David in the moment should have realized that what he was doing was incredibly wrong. Because Bathsheba was a married woman. It was not his wife. He like followed the lust of his heart to go after Bathsheba. Now, David's arrogance, his lustfulness, it made God angry. And you think about the decision that David made in that moment, he could have like made things right and moved on, but instead he continued to dig himself a deeper and deeper hole. Bathsheba got pregnant, and so his mind went, well, instead of owning this, no, he went and had her husband killed out at battle to make it seem like an accident so that Bathsheba could be his wife. It was poor decision after poor decision. Now, that's a pretty dramatic life. Because this is a guy that as we read the Bible, we generally consider David to kind of be one of the heroes of the Bible. And like for a hero of the Bible, for someone who kind of has this like this name of like a man after God's own heart, this isn't like, I don't know, a walk in the park here, David. You are messing up majorly. And to see how David behaves and the actions that he took and the consequences that he experienced because of the poor decisions that he made. Now, I tell you this because this is going to give us the backstory of how the relationship between David and his friend Nathan comes into play. But before we get into the rest of the story, I think it's important that we stop and just address the fact that you and I have made mistakes. I think the story between David and Bathsheba is like, yeah, it's a pretty messed up one, but it's a great one for us to think about how God interacts with us. I'll never forget, guys, I was, I think, 8th grade. I was waiting for the bus the one day for school. I might have told you this story. It was myself and 2 other friends, and we're waiting for the bus. And guys, I was an idiot. I was a middle schooler, right? And I'm thinking, you know what would be really cool is if we started throwing rocks at the stop sign across the street. And so I did, you know? And I started this thing. It was a game, and, you know, guys like to compete. And so we're like, I bet you can't do it twice in a row. And so I hit it once, and then the second rock I threw goes straight over the stop sign, right through the windshield of a red Jeep Wrangler parked about 10, 15 feet behind it. Right? You're like, Todd, didn't you see the Jeep before you threw the first rock? Guys, I was in 8th grade. Like I said, I was an idiot. But you think about what happened in that moment. It was a poor decision. I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story because it makes me seem like even bigger of a jerk, but I will never forget the feeling that I had when the bus arrived. And I watched the rock go through the windshield, and then the bus shows up, and I'm on the bus, and I'm heading to school, thinking I just escaped by vandalizing and damaging personal property. Guys, I had this overwhelming sense of guilt. I felt shameful. I'm like, Todd, you were such a loser. Why would you ever do that? Every single one of us in this room can think of a moment where we messed up. And we think to ourselves that that mess up is something that we can never get over. Like it's going to forever scar my life. That I'm never going to be able to be looked the same by my friends if I ever told them the truth. I want you to know as we look at the story of how God interacted with David, even after the decisions that he's made, it proves us this, that God still used and worked in David's life despite all of his mistakes. And the same is true for you. I think God, what he does is specializes in turning our mess into messages of hope about God. I think he looks at us and says, you know what, you may have messed up, but I think you're bigger than your mistake. I know that the consequences that you were experiencing seem like you cannot get through the storm, but listen, I still believe in you. I still believe that you have entirely a huge amount of worth and that you are lovable, and I'm going to use you, and I'm going to turn your mess into messages about me for you to share with other people. That's the beauty of what we call the gospel, the story of who Jesus is. Because God gave us his son when we do not deserve it. when we were sinners, when we were like the stupid 8th grader who's gonna chuck rocks through windshields, right? God still uses us and meets us where we are. And he wants to meet the worst of the worst in the worst of their moments. And that's true for you as well. So God did end up redeeming David's story. And the interesting thing is that he does so by using his friend Nathan. Take a look at this verse here. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 7 through 9. Here's what it says. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you, and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all Israel and Judah, and if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? See, God used Nathan to meet David in his moment here. Because when we learn, and what we see here is that Nathan basically calls out David here. And he says, why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing the evil in his eyes? He like point blanks calls him onto the carpet. Why? Guys, here's the thing, write this down. Friends recognize failure. Friends recognize failure. And I'm telling you, your soul needs a friend like David, or like Nathan, excuse me. Your soul needs a friend like Nathan. Friends who will look at you and encourage you to grow in your faith. And sometimes we need people to recognize our failure and encourage us to call us out on our mistakes. Paul actually talks about this in the book of Galatians. Here's what Paul says in this idea. It says, dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back into the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in the same way, obey the law of Christ. What Paul is pointing us here to is like an example of unity. This is a great example of unity for our soul when we interact with each other. You need someone to tell you the harsh truth. You need someone to basically call you out every once in a while. Because here's the truth. I've been so many times so grateful for some of the men in my life who have shown up and have called me out with what I like to call my blind spots. Because what happens is we like go living our life, we go about it all as well, we're moving forward. Well, we put our blinders up from some like areas of struggle that we might have, because what sin does and what Satan likes to do in our lives is get us to think that what we're doing, that there's nothing wrong. He'll deceive us so much that we actually become callous to the idea that my actions in my life are not appropriate. And to have a friend like Nathan who called out David, we need a friend in our lives who's just willing to be bold and allow us to see that we're not hitting it. We're missing the mark. I love what this verse here, that what Paul says, it says, man, share each other's burdens. Help the other person. Don't let them navigate down that path by themselves. Go with them. Our souls are meant to have community with each other. And the best part about community is challenging each other to be like Jesus. To motivate each other and to like spur one another along, encourage them to run after Jesus in the areas of our life that we might be falling short. So Nathan was that friend for David. He had made some incredible decisions, horrible decisions I meant, incredibly horrible, whatever I'm trying to say, right? He made horrible decisions. And Nathan basically said, listen, God has something greater for you. Don't get caught up on the past. Let's move past it, but realize that God is still going to use you in your life. We're all guilty of making bad decisions. In the very heat of the moment, we've messed up. It's our nature, guys. If you're trying to live a perfect life, you are going to fail. It's just gonna happen. But during these times of when we fail, we need a friend. We need someone like Nathan. So here's what I want you to think about today. This is what I want to challenge you with. There's two things. What I want you to walk away with tonight, here's the first thing. How can you be a Jonathan to those around you? How can you be a Jonathan to those around you? We all want more friends like Jonathan, but how many of us are willing to become that kind of friend? Not only use our words, but we're willing to stand up and use our actions as well. What would it take for you to become more selfless, a better listener, more sacrificial in your friendships? How can you be a Jonathan to those around you? Now, here's even a braver step for you. I think the first step is like, okay, process this. How can you be a Jonathan to your friends around you? But here's the second thing. This is what I want to challenge you with. I dare you to do this. I dare you to ask people, do you believe I'm a good friend? I dare you to ask them, do you believe you are a good friend? And I'm telling you right now, buckle up and be ready to accept criticism. I'll be honest, I did this once, and I am really grateful that I did. That friend that I asked, I'm like, man, Joe, am I being a good friend to you? And you would think, man, it sounds so elementary, it sounds so childish, Todd. The truth is, it's not. Because I was so blinded by how I was treating my friend. And it allowed me to see that I have so much opportunity to grow who I am, not just personally, but how I interact with other people. So I encourage you to think about, how are you being a Jonathan to your friends? But also, I dare you to ask someone, hey, am I being a good friend? Here's the second thing that I want you to consider. How can you be a Nathan to your friends? Is there someone who is stuck in a rut, stuck in sin? They can't seem to just get out of that area, the struggle in their life. I encourage you to take what Paul said in Galatians chapter 6. Don't let them carry their burdens by themselves. Get involved and in a loving, gentle, humble way. Call them out. Now you have to be careful, because it's also important to make sure that when you're calling a friend out for a struggle, that it's not an area of weakness in your life as well. Right? That's hypocritical. We don't want to go down that route. But a friend like Nathan is willing to love their friend so much that they're willing to ask the hard question or willing to have the hard conversation to help a brother or sister out. How are you going to be a Jonathan, and how can you be a Nathan? Now, this is what I want to end our time on. The band's up here. They're going to close us out. I want you to consider the possibility that each of us needs correction and potentially a little bit of rebuke in our lives. David did. And David went on to be used by God in many, many ways. King David, right, as you track back the genealogy, Jesus comes from the line of David. So much like that we can benefit and learn from David's life, of how God used him. But David was not perfect. He was far from it. You and I think we benefit from being corrected at times. Just being like directed back on course. And so maybe today is the day that God finally breaks through and teaches you and I this valuable lesson that his ways are better than ours. And that we just need to stop living this life by ourselves. Why did God create Adam and say that it wasn't good that he was alone, when everything else on the face of this planet was perfect? Our souls, in order to be healthy, requires other people. It requires companionship. It requires a friendship. And I think it's twofold, not only a relationship with other people, but it's a relationship with our Lord as well. Understanding who Jesus Christ is and why he came to this earth for you. And so I encourage you to just consider, what would it look like for you to kind of bring the walls down and begin allowing other people to be Jonathans, to be Nathans, and to allow the Lord to love you where you're at. Jesus, I'm grateful for this night. I'm grateful that we can always come here to learn the truth about who you are. Lord, I don't know, but the past handful of weeks, have we been just navigating the importance of taking care of our souls, Lord? I've been convicted by this. My eyes and heart have been open to this idea that not only do I have to find rest, not only do I have to own my soul, but Lord, I need to be unified with other people. My soul longs for other people. I need community in my life. And Lord, my prayer is for these students. I know it's not easy to be a teenager. The pressures that they're facing, even in the midst of our world, Lord. But Jesus, I know that you're with them. I just pray that that truth would resonate in their hearts and minds tonight as well. Lord, would you allow them to see that they need other people to link arms with as well? So God, would you put a Jonathan in their lives? Someone who is not only willing to listen to them, but also help them in the times of need? And Lord, would you also put a Nathan in their lives as well? Someone who is willing to bring up the difficult stuff, to address our blind spots and help us see that we aren't living the life that you call us to live. And together, unified, we can run after you. Jesus, we pray this in your name. Amen.
us all this week and for a long time to just remember to be a friend like Jonathan and Nathan, and to also find friends like Jonathan and Nathan. God, I pray that you'll put it on everyone's hearts tonight just to look for friends that could be that for them and that they could be for other people. I pray that you would just help us all unite, because that's what we're supposed to do, because that's what you've done for us. God, thank you for all that you've done for us and the mercy you've shown us, and that you are a friend. All right, guys, we got another song. Stand up and sing with us.
I was buried beneath my shame. Could carry the kind of pain. It was meant to. Jesus, when I lay. My sin was heavy, the chains break at the rate of your glory. I needed shelter, my and you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Your love is the way I'm free. I have a future, my eyes are open. It's spoken from my name. I ran out of that grave.
coming, guys. Come back next week. Good seeing you.
2021.